The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not smoke, not blood, not anything from the stupid accident I vaguely remembered. Just cold coffee, hairspray, and the particular plastic tang of a room that had never once had its windows opened. My skull throbbed like someone had used it as a kick drum. I pressed a hand to my temple, groaned, and opened my eyes to a ceiling covered in track lighting. Not my ceiling. My ceiling had a water stain shaped like Ohio. I sat up too fast, and the room tilted. I was on a leather bench in some kind of rehearsal studio. Soundproofed walls, an upright piano shoved into the corner, a floor-to-ceiling mirror running the length of one wall. My reflection stared back at me, and my stomach dropped straight through the floor. The man in the mirror was not a 27-year-old choir teacher who fell asleep grading solfege worksheets more nights than he'd like to admit. He was gorgeous in the specific engineered way people only look in music videos. Dark hair falling over deep-set hazel eyes, cheekbones you could slice bread with, and a black Henley that fit like it had been sewn onto him in a wind tunnel. He looked like the kind of man who ruins your life in a divorce court and looks incredible doing it. And then the memories arrived, uninvited, like party guests kicking down the door. Oh no, oh absolutely not. I knew this face. I knew this room. I knew, with the sick clarity of a man watching his own execution, exactly whose body I was sitting in. Elliot Hargrove, 24 years old. Star of a web novel I'd read on my phone at 2 a.m, 3 nights before I apparently died. A bag of gummy bears open on my nightstand, my chair tipping backward off its wheels, my head meeting the corner of a bookshelf on the way down. Not exactly a hero's death. More of a Darwin Award nomination with a side of dramatic irony, since the last thing I ever did on Earth was read the exact story I was now trapped inside. Center stage was a web novel about a reality singing competition in Los Angeles, the kind of show that turns 5 ridiculously talented strangers into America's next boy band, live on national television. And Elliot Hargrove, genius vocalist, industry nepo baby, an omega with a 5-octave range and a personality like a knife left in the freezer, was the villain, the rival. The guy engineered by the plot to be jealous, cruel, and gorgeous right up until episode 19, when he'd be exposed for lip-syncing, a lie, a setup, orchestrated by the one love interest who was secretly the real Snake, publicly humiliated on a live stream watched by 11 million people, and quietly deleted from the narrative like a bad rough draft. Cannon fodder, a stepping stone with cheekbones. And I was now living inside him. Fantastic, I muttered out loud, and even my voice was different. Lower, smoother, dripping with an ease I had never once possessed as a man who spent his 20s conducting a middle school choir through Let It Go for the 9th consecutive winter concert. Absolutely fantastic. I choked on a gummy bear grading papers at midnight and woke up as the guy who gets publicly canceled on live TV. This is what I get for staying up late reading fan fiction instead of sleeping like a responsible adult. Okay, think. I dragged both hands down my face, Elliot's face, unfairly symmetrical even mid-crisis, and made myself breathe. I knew this story. I had the entire plot rattling around in my head like a spoiler-filled group chat. I knew who the real villain actually was. I knew the trap waiting at episode 19, and unlike Elliot Hargrove, born and raised to be cold, I had spent 6 years gently talking a room full of 13-year-olds through stage fright, which, frankly, felt like harder work than surviving a reality show plot. I could do this. I just had to keep my head down, play the part the plot expected of me, take as many naps as this ridiculous new schedule would allow, and not get anywhere near whatever machinery was going to try to destroy this man. New rule, I told myself, straightening Elliot's spine, arranging his devastating face into the bored, superior expression I remembered from the book's descriptions. Be exactly as insufferable as everyone expects. Stay a rumor, not a person. Survive to the finale, slide out quietly, and, ideally, figure out where the craft services table is, because dying apparently works up an appetite. I had approximately 90 seconds to admire the plan before reality showed up to test it. Somewhere beyond the door, I could hear voices, easy laughter, the scuff of sneakers on polished wood, someone humming a melody that sounded suspiciously like it belonged to a song I'd streamed on repeat, back when I was still just a guy grading solfege worksheets in Ohio. My stomach did something complicated and unhelpful at the sound of it. The studio door slid open before I could finish congratulating myself on the plan. Real quick, before this gets completely out of hand. If you're new here, welcome, and if you've ever wondered what happens when a tired, slightly lazy schoolteacher gets dropped into the body of a gorgeous reality TV villain with zero warning. You're exactly where you need to be. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what these 5 men are about to do to my entire nervous system, because it only gets more chaotic from here. Okay, back to the disaster. They walked in trailed by 2 producers with clipboards and a production assistant, holding what looked like 6 iced coffees for 5 men who clearly did not need the caffeine. I recognized every one of them instantly, the way you recognize your own front door. Leading the group was William Liam Hale, 25, the show's undisputed star, a golden retriever poured into a human body, sun-streaked brown hair, a tan that suggested he surfed before sunrise, and a smile so wide and unguarded it looked like it might get him in trouble someday. In the novel, he was the destined winner, the alpha everyone adored, the reason America tuned in every Thursday night. He spotted me and lit up like I'd personally hung the moon. "Elliot, there you are." His voice was warm, easy, exactly the golden retriever register the book had promised. "Morning. You're looking." "Here we go," I thought, and forced Elliot's mouth into a sneer I had genuinely never made in my own body. "You're late," I said, and my voice came out like chilled silk, cutting clean through his sentence. "Do you think smiling at people is a substitute for actually rehearsing, or is that just working out for you so far?" It was cruel. It was unnecessary. It was, I was fairly sure, word for word something Book Elliot would have said. Liam blinked. His smile faltered, and then, instead of laughing it off the way the novel described, he froze completely. His mouth fell open. His eyes went comically wide, like I'd just announced I was secretly the Pope. He took a full step backward, one hand flying to his own chest, ears flushing a shade of red that had nothing to do with embarrassment on his part. Wait, why is he reacting like that? I frowned internally, watching him carefully while keeping my face locked in icy disdain. In the book, he just laughs and says something disgustingly nice back. Honestly, my traitorous inner monologue continued, completely without my permission. He's better looking in person than the illustrations. That jawline should be illegal. And why does he smell like ocean air and clean laundry? Stop staring, idiot. You'll get caught. Liam's eyes, if possible, got wider. He looked around the room like he was checking whether anyone else had heard something impossible, then back at me, ears now fully crimson. He looked terrified and thrilled at the same time, which was an expression I had genuinely never seen a human face make before. "Liam?" A second man stepped up beside him, grinning, clearly delighted by his friend's meltdown. "You good, man? Did Elliot break you already? It's not even 9 a.m. Michael Mikey Reyes, 23, the group's resident chaos gremlin, all cheekbones and mischief, the kind of face that had 4 million Instagram followers before he'd ever sung a note on television. In the book, he was the playful one, a rare beta in a cast of alphas, which somehow made him fear absolutely nothing and no one. I swung my glare onto him. "And you," I said, sharp as a paper cut, "stop laughing like a hyena. You're not an artist, you're a filter with a jawline. It's exhausting." His laugh cut off mid-breath. His mouth snapped shut. His usual mischievous eyes went round as dinner plates, and he took a stumbling step back, grabbing the sleeve of the man beside him for balance. He pointed at me, opened his mouth, and produced no sound whatsoever. Got him, I thought. Smug for exactly 1 second before guilt crashed the party. Poor guy. He's actually hilarious, and probably the sweetest one of the 5, and I just called him a filter. His energy is like sunshine in a can. It's genuinely hard not to smile around him. Mikey made a sound like a kettle starting to boil. He clapped both hands over his mouth, eyes darting frantically between the other 3 men, silently mouthing, "Did you hear that? Did you hear that?" Daniel Cross, 26, quiet, sharp-eyed, the show's in-house producer and vocal arranger, the kind of man who made everyone in a 10-foot radius sit up straighter without saying a word. He stepped forward, clipboard held so tightly against his chest that his knuckles had gone white. "Elliot," he said, voice carefully level. "You seem to have a lot of opinions this morning." I scoffed, chin tipped up. "Your arrangement for the group number is amateur hour. I don't understand why anyone calls you a genius. It's frankly embarrassing to be in the same room. I'm the worst person alive," I thought immediately, wincing internally, even as Elliot's face stayed carved from ice. That arrangement is incredible. I heard the demo at 2 a.m. through somebody's phone speaker and nearly cried. He's a prodigy, and I just told him he's amateur hour. I hope he doesn't actually believe me. Daniel's pen slipped out of his fingers and clattered to the floor. He didn't move to pick it up. He just stared at me, chest rising and falling like he'd sprinted up 6 flights of stairs. Charlie Bennett, 27, Broadway transplant, gentle-eyed, the most classically trained singer in the group, a man who managed to look regal even in gym shorts. He stepped in next, trying and failing to keep his professional composure. Elliot, perhaps we could work on breath support before the read-through. I'd be happy to coach. I don't need coaching from a man who acts like every scene is a funeral, I said, turning my face away with theatrical disdain, stiff, over-rehearsed. I'd rather teach myself. Stop it, you monster. My own mind hissed at me. His hands are gorgeous and gentle, and he's the most talented performer in this cast by a mile. I'd actually love to have him teach me anything. Why do you have to be like this? Charlie's composure cracked clean down the middle. His lips parted in a silent gasp, and something soft and stunned bloomed in his eyes. And then, from the back of the group, the last one stepped forward, out of the shadow the doorway had cast. Robert Rex Kane, 26, heir to the Kane hospitality empire, the family that owned half the boutique hotels on the West Coast, tall enough to make the ceiling feel low, with a stare that made production assistants find urgent business elsewhere. In the book, he was the hidden mastermind, the man behind the curtain who orchestrated Elliot's downfall for reasons the novel never fully explained. He didn't look shocked like the others. He looked interested in the way a predator looks interested. Elliot, he said, low and mocking, stopping close enough that I had to tilt my chin up to meet his eyes. You really think you're better than the 4 of us? I didn't back down. 6 years of staring down 8th graders had prepared me for exactly this. Get out of my way, Kane. You're a trust fund tourist playing celebrity. You're the least talented person in this building, including the coffee guy. He's terrifying, and my heart is doing something it has absolutely no business doing right now, I thought, and hated myself instantly. In the book, he's the one who never mind. He's not going to hurt me. Why does my pulse do that when he gets close? Fear or something worse? Rex went very, very still. The mocking edge dropped clean off his face, his eyes narrowed, pupils flickering like he was trying to read a language he half remembered. He leaned in, close enough that I caught the low, expensive scent of cedar and something darker underneath it, and murmured, so quiet only I could hear it. Interesting. I jerked back, flustered and confused, and turned away with a huff that was 90% panic dressed up as attitude. What is happening? Why does everyone look like they've witnessed a miracle? Did I overdo the villain act? Did I break all 5 of them in under 90 seconds? Rex straightened, looked at the other 4, and gave one small, sharp nod. I had no idea, in that moment, what that nod meant. I thought I was simply doing an excellent job playing my part. Behind my back, 5 of the most famous almost adults in America huddled together, faces pale, eyes huge, hands clamped over mouths, and silently, frantically confirmed the impossible thing that had just happened to all of them at once. They could hear my thoughts. Tell me I didn't just hallucinate that, Mikey whispered, hands still over his mouth, eyes cutting toward where I was now stretching by the mirror, putting the maximum possible distance between myself and the scene of my crimes. Tell me you guys heard it too. Please. I need a witness or I'm calling my therapist right now. I heard it, Liam breathed, dragging both hands through his hair, looking genuinely dazed, like a man who'd walked into a glass door. He said I look good. He said I smell like the ocean. Out loud he called me late and lazy, but in his head, Mikey, he called me sunshine. Same, Daniel said, voice unsteady, leaning back against the wall like his knees had briefly considered quitting. He tore my arrangement apart to my face. In his head he said the demo made him want to cry. He called me a prodigy. Charlie nodded slowly, eyes still soft with wonder. He said my acting was stiff and over-rehearsed, but he thinks my hands are gentle. He wants me to teach him. He said, and I quote, that he'd love to have me teach him, word for word. They all turned to Rex, who stood apart, arms crossed, something dark and delighted flickering behind his eyes. And you? Liam asked. Rex's mouth curved, slow and satisfied. He called me a trust fund tourist, least talented person in the building. He let that sit a beat. In his head, he thinks I'm terrifying. Another beat, his voice dropping into something lower, hungrier. And he thinks his heart shouldn't be racing like it is when I get close. He thinks it might be something worse than fear. Silence. It was impossible. It broke every law of physics any of them had ever half listened to in high school. But every single one of them had heard it, heard the cold, cutting words leaving Elliot Hargrove's mouth, and underneath them, running exactly opposite, a second voice, soft, anxious, achingly kind, and, Daniel noted, tilting his head, occasionally very concerned with the location of the nearest snack table. He's acting, Charlie said slowly, wonder blooming across his face. He's playing a role. His mouth is in character. His heart clearly never got the script. Why would he do that? Mikey wondered aloud, tilting his head, staring at me with open fascination now, like I was a magic trick he was determined to figure out. Why pretend to hate us if he actually thinks we're? Who cares why? Liam said. And something in his voice shifted, warm shock hardening into quiet resolve. He looked over at me, cold-faced, arms crossed, stretching alone by the mirror like a man building a wall brick by brick, and felt his chest ache with a fierce, sudden protectiveness he did not remember signing up for that morning. This is the best thing that's ever happened to this show. We can't tell him we know, Daniel said immediately, sharp and practical even mid-crisis. If he finds out we can hear him, he'll build the wall twice as high. We keep this between the five of us. Agreed, Rex said, stepping into the circle, eyes glinting. We know the truth now. We know exactly what he wants, even when he says the opposite, even when he tells us to get lost. His voice dropped, commanding, certain. The script says he's the villain. The script is wrong. The real Elliot is the one running commentary in his own head, and we're the only 5 people on Earth who get to hear him. Liam's face broke into a smile so bright it could have been used to power the soundstage. He looked over at me, feeling something settle in his chest that felt suspiciously like falling. Then we rewrite it, he said. We get close, we make him ours, and since none of us have to guess what he actually wants, we'll always know exactly when he means stay, even when he says go. Across the room, blissfully unaware that 5 reality TV heartthrobs had just formed a conspiracy against my emotional defenses, I finished my stretches, turned around, and caught them all staring. What are you whispering about? I snapped. We have 4 hours before the read-through, and I would genuinely like to spend at least 20 minutes of that lying face down on a couch. If you're going to huddle like it's prom, at least huddle productively. Ugh, I'm such a drama queen. I thought immediately, sighing internally. They look adorable standing together like that. Like a boy band litter of golden retriever puppies. Stop being mean, Elliot. You like them. You like them so much it's genuinely inconvenient for your survival plan, which, for the record, mostly just involves napping through this and surviving to the finale. Liam's whole face lit up like Christmas morning. He crossed the room and planted himself directly beside me, shoulder brushing mine, close enough that I had to physically stop myself from leaning into the warmth radiating off him. Personal space, idiot. Why is he standing that close? Okay, but he's warm. That's fine. That's a fine, neutral, non-emotional observation about ambient body heat. Sorry, Elliot, Liam said, grin widening impossibly further. We were just saying how great you look today. Want to run through the opening number together? Do whatever you want, I muttered, glaring at a point somewhere over his left shoulder, because looking directly at him felt structurally unsafe. Just don't get in my way, and somebody bring me a coffee if you're going to keep me standing here instead of napping. My heart, traitor that it was, did a full somersault. 3 days into rehearsals, I learned something crucial about live television. The rigging is held together with prayer, gaffer tape, and the collective hope of a production company trying not to go over budget. I also learned that a 14-hour rehearsal day makes a man deeply, spiritually nostalgic for his old life, back when the biggest occupational hazard was a trumpet player who refused to tune his instrument. We were blocking the opening number for the first live broadcast. An elaborate staging with a lighting truss that lowered over the stage during the bridge, all 6 of us hitting our marks under a rain of programmable spotlights that had clearly been designed by someone who'd never had to actually stand underneath them. I'd spent the last 3 days perfecting my cold, aloof choreography, stand slightly apart, look devastating, radiate disdain, complain internally about the lack of a scheduled nap break, while internally cataloging increasingly humiliating observations about every single one of my 5 castmates that I sincerely hoped none of them could hear. They could, of course. All of it. But I still didn't know that. We were mid-run when it happened. Liam hit his mark at center stage, head tipped back for the big note, one hand raised toward the lighting rig above him, and the truss groaned. A sharp, metallic shriek, followed by the unmistakable, stomach-dropping sound of a support clamp giving out. I didn't think. 6 years of yanking distracted 12-year-olds out of the path of falling music stands had wired something permanent into my nervous system, and it fired before Elliot Hargrove's careful, cultivated coldness, or my own considerable laziness, had a chance to weigh in on the decision. I lunged, grabbed 2 fistfuls of Liam's shirt, and hauled him backward off his mark half a second before 400 pounds of lighting equipment crashed into the exact spot where he'd been standing. The sound was enormous. The silence after it was worse. We hit the floor together, me on my back, Liam sprawled half across my chest, both of us staring up at the torn cable still swinging gently overhead like nothing had happened. Somewhere behind us, someone screamed. Production assistants were already sprinting, shouting for the stage manager, for medical, for someone to cut power to the rig. I didn't notice any of it. I was too busy noticing that Liam's hand had fisted in the front of my shirt, right over my heart, and that his own heart was slamming against my ribs like it was trying to escape his body, and that his eyes, wide blown out, staring down at me from 6 inches away, had gone glassy in a way that had nothing to do with the near-death experience. "You," he said, voice cracking clean in half. "You just... Please be okay, please be okay, please be okay." My mind was screaming, loud enough that I could barely hear my own outer voice trying to assemble something dismissive. If that thing had hit him, if I'd been half a second slower, I don't care what the script says, I don't care what I'm supposed to be, I would have, "Oh my God, his hand is on my chest, I can feel his heartbeat. Why does that feel like the safest thing I've ever felt?" "Get off me," I managed out loud, breathless, mortified, absolutely not pushing him away with anywhere near the force the words implied. "You weigh a ton." All that surfing and none of it's muscle, apparently. Liam didn't move, didn't even seem to hear the insult. He was staring down at me like I'd rearranged the stars personally for his benefit, tears standing bright and unshed in his eyes. "You saved my life," he said, hushed, like it was a secret. You could have let it happen. It's not like you like me. You've said so, every single day. You've told me exactly how little you think of me." Every word a lie, I thought, helpless against the truth clawing its way up. "I like you more than I've liked anyone in either of my entire lives. I would do it again in a heartbeat. I would do it 1,000 times. Please stop looking at me like that. I can't breathe, and it has nothing to do with 400 pounds of aluminum truss." Liam went rigid above me. His breath caught audibly, and then, right there, on the floor of a soundstage in Burbank, in front of 4 stunned castmates and a production crew slowly realizing nobody was actually hurt, he leaned down, pressed his forehead to mine, and whispered, thick with something that sounded dangerously like heartbreak and hope tangled together. I heard that. I froze. Heard what? I didn't say anything. "You didn't," Liam agreed, and his voice shook. "You thought it, and I heard it. Elliot, I don't know how, I don't know why, but I can hear you. All of us can. We've been hearing you for 3 days. The world did something complicated and vertiginous. Like the floor had tilted 45 degrees without informing my inner ear. I stared up at him, at his wet lashes and his stupidly beautiful face and the truss still creaking gently overhead, and felt every carefully constructed wall inside Elliot Hargrove's chest develop its first hairline crack. "That's not possible," I said faintly. "It is," Daniel said, crouching down beside us, voice unsteady, Charlie and Mikey crowding in close behind him, all 4 of them looking at me not like a rival, not like a villain, but like something they'd been searching for without knowing its name. Rex hung back at the edge of the group, arms crossed, expression unreadable, except for the way his gaze had gone very, very focused. "We've heard everything," Charlie said softly. "Every kind thing you've thought and refused to say. We know you don't actually hate us," Mikey added, voice cracking on the last word. I lay there on the floor of a soundstage, in the arms of a man I'd just knocked out of the path of certain death, 5 castmates staring down at me with expressions I had no cultural or emotional framework for, and thought with the specific clarity of a man whose entire survival plan had just been shot, stabbed, and set on fire. Well, this changes everything. There was a beat of heavy, life-altering silence. Then a stagehand, jogging past with a fire extinguisher he clearly had no idea what to do with, tripped over the same fallen cable that had just nearly killed a pop star, and went down in a heap of cords and safety cones with a very undignified yelp. Everyone in the immediate vicinity, me, Liam, Daniel, Charlie, Mikey, even the medic who'd finally arrived, turned to look at him in unison. "Are you okay?" I called out, still flat on my back. "Fine," the stagehand shouted. giving a thumbs up from inside the wreckage of safety cones. Totally fine. Carry on with your moment. The tension broke instantly. Mikey wheezed. Charlie pressed a hand over his mouth to stop from laughing. Even Rex's mouth twitched. Liam, still half sprawled over me, buried his face in my shoulder and shook with poorly suppressed laughter. And for one blissful second, the entire soundstage remembered how to breathe again. Great, I muttered, staring up at the ceiling. Add survive, a falling truss, and an emotional confession simultaneously to the extremely short list of things they never covered in my teaching certification program. To be fair, Mikey managed, wiping his eyes, I don't think anyone's teaching certification covers this. I spent the next 48 hours in what I can only describe as a hostage negotiation with my own dignity. Okay, I said, pacing the length of the green room while 5 men watched me with the patient, indulgent expressions of people watching a cat discover its reflection for the first time. Okay, new rules. If you can hear my thoughts, then you also heard the part where I said absolutely none of this leaves this room, ever, to anyone. And also the part where I said I'd genuinely trade a kidney for a 20-minute nap right now. Heard both, Rex said mildly, from where he'd claimed the entire couch like a throne. Though I did enjoy the part where you called me a trust fund tourist and then immediately thought about how good I smell. I did not think that. You did. Cedar and something dark, I believe, were your exact words. I hate all of you. You very specifically don't, Liam said, grinning, dropping onto the arm of the couch closest to me. We heard that part too, repeatedly. I pressed both hands over my face and made a sound like a dying kettle. This was, objectively, the worst possible outcome of my careful, sensible, entirely reasonable plan to stay quiet, invisible, and mildly horizontal until the finale. I had one job. Do not get emotionally involved with the 5 most famous men in America, all of whom apparently had unrestricted access to my internal monologue at all times, including, I realized with fresh horror, right now. Stop thinking. Think about baseball. Think about taxes. Think about anything that isn't. Anything that isn't what? Mikey asked, delighted, leaning forward with the exact energy of a raccoon that had just located an unattended snack bag. Nothing. I wasn't thinking anything. You were absolutely thinking something. I was thinking about how none of you are going to survive to next week's episode if you keep this up, I said, with as much icy menace as I could muster, while my ears burned a shade of red that had officially betrayed the entire operation. Charlie, ever the diplomat, cleared his throat gently. For what it's worth, he said, we're not going to tell anyone. Not the producers, not the press. This stays between the 6 of us. 6, I repeated flatly. You're included in the 6, Liam said, like it was obvious. Like it was the most obvious thing in the world. You're not just a source of great content anymore, Elliot. You're, he faltered, ears going pink, and I caught the stray edge of his thought before he could rein it in. Something warm and a little desperate that sounded a great deal like mine. Please let him be mine. You're one of us. I did not have a response prepared for that. In 6 years of teaching middle school choir, nothing, not the year the tenor section staged a walkout over solo assignments, not the time a bat got into the auditorium during dress rehearsal, had prepared me for 5 gorgeous, emotionally overinvested reality television contestants deciding, apparently unanimously, that they were going to adopt me like a stray. Fine, I said finally, because it was the only word I could locate in the wreckage of my composure. Fine. But I'm still playing my part on camera. Cold, difficult, unimpressed. That doesn't change. And I still want a nap before the next rehearsal, or I genuinely cannot be held responsible for what I say to the choreographer. 5 faces lit up in near-perfect unison, which was, frankly, unsettling. Deal, Daniel said. I'll personally guard the green room door. Sure, Rex added, low and amused, eyes glinting like he'd just been handed the keys to something valuable. Play whatever part you want on camera, sweetheart. We already know the truth, and we'll wake you up in 20 minutes. I did not have a response for sweetheart either. My brain simply declined to load. Life, from that point forward, became a masterclass in cognitive dissonance. Publicly, on set, in front of cameras and producers and the 11,000 fans who followed the show's official account, I was exactly the villain the script demanded. Sharp-tongued, dismissive, visibly unimpressed by anything short of a Grammy. Privately, in every unguarded moment between takes, I was being systematically, relentlessly courted by 5 men who had access to the least defended part of my entire existence, and who had all apparently decided, without consulting me, that my well-documented laziness was a personality trait to be indulged rather than corrected. Liam touched like sunshine felt, warm, constant, freely given. He'd rest his chin on my shoulder while checking his phone, sling an arm around my waist, walking to catering, steal fries off my plate with zero shame, and a grin that made it impossible to stay annoyed for longer than 4 seconds. He also, disturbingly, began appearing beside whatever surface I'd chosen to lie face down on during breaks, silent and patient, like a golden retriever guarding a nap. Personal space, I'd hiss, elbowing him without any real force behind it. "You like it," he'd say, unbothered, because of course he knew. He always knew. "I do like it," I'd think, immediately furious at myself. "I like it an embarrassing amount. Please keep doing it. Please never stop doing it. This is a disaster." His ears would go pink every single time, right on schedule. Mikey was chaos-given cheekbones, draping himself across me during downtime, narrating his own life like a nature documentary directly into my ear, dragging me into TikTok trends I refused to admit I found funny. One Tuesday, without warning, he flopped directly on top of me mid-nap and announced, in his best documentary narrator voice, "And here we observe the elusive Hargrove in its natural habitat, horizontal, hostile, and secretly delighted. I am not delighted," I said into a couch cushion. "I am unconscious. Go away. You're the scariest, most intimidating person I've ever met," he announced solemnly, right after I'd told him his sense of humor belonged in a landfill. Definitely. Truly frightening. Currently napping on a beanbag chair like a large, irritable cat. He's not wrong, I'd think miserably, and Mikey's grin would widen like sunrise. Daniel's affection came through his work. He'd rearrange entire vocal parts to give me the harmonies he knew, somehow, that I'd secretly wanted, without ever asking. He'd sit beside me at the piano after everyone else had gone, playing something soft and unfinished, watching my face for a reaction he never had to ask me to voice out loud. This is derivative, I'd say, about a melody that made my throat go tight. Uninspired. "You cried a little," he'd murmur, not even looking up from the keys. "I heard it before you felt it on your face." Charlie touched like he was afraid I'd shatter, a hand at the small of my back through a crowded hallway, fingers straightening my collar before a take, a thumb brushing a smudge of stage makeup from my cheekbone with a tenderness that made my whole chest ache. "Relax your shoulders," he'd murmur, hands sliding down my arms during a stretch. "You carry too much." "I carry exactly the correct amount," I'd retort, skin burning everywhere his hands had been. And frankly, I'd carry it a lot better with a 20-minute power nap, which I have been requesting since Tuesday. "I'll set a timer," he'd say, entirely serious, and somehow that was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to me. His hands are magic, I'd think helplessly. "Please don't stop. I don't know how to ask for that out loud, but please, please don't stop." And Rex didn't do gentle. Rex did possessive, low, and absolutely unapologetic about it. He'd fall into step beside me in crowded hallways, one hand settling low on my back, steering me clear of gawking interns and overeager fans with the casual authority of a man who considered the space around me his personal jurisdiction. "I don't need a bodyguard," I'd snap, trying to step out from under his hand and failing, because he simply didn't move. Once, mid-hallway, riding entirely on nerve and exhaustion, I decided to test a theory. I leaned in first before he could, and murmured against his ear, low and deliberately smug, "You know, for a trust fund tourist, you're surprisingly useful to have around." Rex went very still. For the first time since I'd woken up in this ridiculous life, he was the one who couldn't produce a comeback. His jaw ticked. His ears, the great, unshakable Robert Rex, Kane's actual ears, went faintly pink. "Ha," I thought, delighted. "Got you back, for once." "I heard that too," he said, low and rough, recovering fast, leaning down until our noses nearly touched. "Careful, little rival. Turnabout's a dangerous game to start with me." "I know you don't need a bodyguard," he continued, as if the hallway incident hadn't happened, though the tips of his ears stayed suspiciously warm. "I like being in the way regardless. Deal with it." He's like a wall, I'd think, heat crawling up my neck. A very tall, very warm, extremely inconvenient wall that I do not want to move away from. Why does being near him feel like coming home to a house that's already on fire? Rex's smirk, every single time, said he'd heard every word. Somewhere in the middle of that first week, the show sent us to a media day at a studio lot near Burbank, a string of interviews, a photo shoot, and a mandatory team bonding segment that involved an escape room, of all things, which the producers clearly assumed would generate excellent footage of 5 gorgeous men working together under pressure. What it actually generated was 40 minutes of me lying flat on the floor of a fake pirate ship set, refusing to participate on the grounds that I had already solved the puzzle in my head and saw no reason to physically get up and move the lever myself. "Elliot," Charlie said, crouching beside me with the exasperated patience of a man who had clearly done this before. "The lever is right there. It's 4 feet away." "I'm aware of where the lever is," I said, eyes closed. "I did the math. Pulling it doesn't require me to be vertical. Vertical is a choice I am declining to make right now, on principle, and also because the floor is surprisingly comfortable." "It does, actually," Daniel said. "That's how levers work." Then I've made my peace with losing. Liam, predictably, thought this was the funniest thing that had happened all week, and instead of arguing, simply scooped me up off the floor, one arm under my knees, one behind my back, and deposited me directly in front of the lever like I weighed nothing at all, which, given the way my stomach flipped, was deeply unfair to my composure. "There," he said, entirely too pleased with himself. "Vertical. Problem solved." "I hate this job," I muttered, pulling the lever anyway, mostly so nobody would notice how red my face had gone. He picked I weigh absolutely nothing. That should not be as attractive as it currently is. Liam's ears went instantly gloriously pink, and Mikey, filming the entire thing on his phone for the show's official account, did not even try to hide his delighted cackling. We won the escape room 40 seconds before the timer ran out, a fact I maintain had nothing to do with my early strategic reconnaissance from the floor, and everything to do with Daniel actually being a genius, and Charlie having read every mystery novel published since 1995. By the end of the second week, I had stopped being able to convince myself this was mockery. Nobody put this much sustained, coordinated effort into a joke, and certainly nobody set actual timers for other people's naps as a bit. I lay awake at night in the cast house, a sprawling Spanish revival place up in the hills with a pool nobody had time to use, running the day's events on a loop, and arrived reluctantly at the only conclusion that fit the evidence. They meant it, all of it. Every soft look, every unnecessary touch, every ridiculous, tender, over-the-top display of affection toward a man who spent all day being deliberately terrible to them on camera and unapologetically horizontal the second the cameras stopped rolling. They actually like me, I thought, staring at the ceiling of my borrowed bedroom, heart doing something complicated and unfamiliar, all 5 of them. Somehow. Despite everything, despite the villain act, despite the naps, despite the fact that in a few weeks the plot is going to try to burn this entire thing to the ground. In the room down the hall, 5 men lay awake with the exact same thought running through their heads on repeat, delighted and terrified in equal measure, because they'd heard every word of mine, too. The next morning, in what I can only describe as an act of coordinated retaliation, I woke to find my bedroom door propped open, my curtains thrown wide to let in exactly the kind of aggressive California sunlight I had spent my entire life avoiding, and a full breakfast tray balanced on the nightstand. Eggs, toast, and, in a move that felt personally targeted, absolutely no pineapple anywhere in sight. "We heard you complaining about the call sheet at 2 a.m., Daniel said from the doorway, entirely unbothered by the fact from beneath a pile of blankets like a disgruntled bear woken early from hibernation. 6 a.m. rehearsal moved to 8. "You're welcome. I didn't ask for this," I said, sitting up anyway, because the eggs did, admittedly, smell incredible. "You thought," and I quote, "if one more person schedules something before 9 a.m. I am simply not going to show up. They can film an empty rehearsal room," Charlie said, appearing behind Daniel with an armful of what looked suspiciously like a weighted blanket. "We took it as a professional development opportunity. This is emotional blackmail disguised as breakfast." "It's extremely effective emotional blackmail disguised as breakfast," Mikey corrected, poking his head in from somewhere further down the hall. "Eat your eggs, Your Majesty." Liam already fought the production assistant for the good syrup. I ate the eggs. I did not, under any circumstances, admit how much I appreciated the extra 2 hours of sleep, though judging by the identical smug expression on all 5 of their faces when I finally shuffled into the van that morning, none of them needed me to say it out loud. The first live broadcast arrived like a freight train. I stood in the wings of the downtown arena, feeling the floor hum with the energy of 9,000 people in the seats and however many millions more watching at home, and reminded myself, with the grim determination of a man walking into a dentist appointment, that tonight was supposed to be the beginning of the plot's slow grind toward Elliot Hargrove's public destruction. Episode 1 of 19. I had 18 more weeks to somehow keep this train from derailing directly into my face, and I intended to spend every single one of them being professionally, convincingly cold, ideally with regularly scheduled breaks for horizontal recovery. Backstage, the green room had been transformed into something resembling a war room, garment racks, a hair and makeup station, 3 separate producers pacing with headsets clamped to their ears, and in the middle of it all, Mikey attempting to convince the wardrobe department that his jacket needed one more sequin, structurally, for morale. I sat very still in a barber's chair while a stylist attacked my hair with a comb like it had personally wronged her, and used the stillness to catalog every possible way tonight could go wrong. Nervous, Liam appeared at my elbow, dressed in white and gold, looking like something off the cover of a magazine no one could actually afford. "Of course not," I said, chin lifting on reflex. "I was born for stages like this, unlike some people who mostly get by on a good tan and a nice smile." He looks unreal, I thought immediately, betraying myself as always. I'm terrified I'm going to mess something up and drag him down with me. I want everyone in that arena to see exactly how incredible he is. I don't care what happens to me tonight as long as he's fine. Liam's breath caught. He reached over, gently tucking a stray piece of hair off my forehead, fingers lingering a beat too long against my skin. "You're incredible, Elliot. I mean it. Stay close to me out there, okay? Don't touch me," I said automatically, swatting his hand away, face burning. "I don't need supervision. Stay close anyway," he said, softer now, eyes searching mine with a hope that had nowhere left to hide. "Please, don't let go of me tonight." "I won't," I thought, before I could stop myself. "I promise I won't." His eyes went glassy. He nodded once, and didn't say anything else, because he didn't have to. The stage manager called places. The lights dropped. The crowd's roar swallowed everything. I don't fully remember the first 2/3 of the performance, just flashes, the burn of the lights, the pulse of the bass through the stage floor, 6 voices weaving together in a harmony that felt, for one suspended moment, like something bigger than any of us individually. I stopped thinking about the plot. I stopped thinking about survival. I just sang, and it felt, briefly, like flying. And then, on the final turn of the bridge, during the partner sequence, where the choreography called for Liam and me to break apart and face the crowd separately, his foot caught the edge of a riser. He went down hard, arms pinwheeling, the whole arena sucking in one collective gasp, and I moved before I'd finished deciding to, closing the gap in half a second, grabbing his wrist and hauling him upright with everything my body had left. The choreography said let go, turn away, finish the number apart, exactly as blocked, exactly as rehearsed 100 times. Liam didn't let go. He turned toward me instead, laced our fingers together in front of 9,000 people and 11 million cameras, and pulled me straight into the center spotlight, beaming that blinding, sunlit smile directly at my face as the final note rang out and the lights snapped to white. We stood there, hands locked, chests heaving, while the arena detonated into screaming. Why are we holding hands? This is not the blocking. Everyone is watching. Everyone is going to think, "Oh my God, his hand is huge and warm. Don't let go. Don't you dare let go. This might genuinely be the best moment of either of my entire lives." Liam squeezed my hand 3 times, quick and deliberate, and didn't let go even as the curtain began its slow descent. Backstage was chaos. Producers shouting into headsets, publicists already fielding calls, the internet, I would learn later, actively catching fire in real time, Elliot and Liam trending within 90 seconds of the broadcast ending. I finally wrestled my hand free, face burning, and turned away, trying and spectacularly failing to look annoyed. "You almost tanked the whole number," I muttered. "Clumsy. You caught me," Liam said, unbothered, glowing. "You'll always catch me. I know that now." I turned to find all 5 of them waiting, no longer arranged as rivals or castmates, but as something that had no name yet, looking at me with a tenderness that stole every scrap of air out of my lungs. "You saved him," Charlie said softly. "Twice this month," Daniel added, something warm cracking through his usual composure. "You held on," Rex said, low and satisfied, eyes dark with a promise I wasn't ready to name. Liam stepped forward and touched my cheek, light as a held breath. "You didn't let me fall," he said. "And I'm never letting you go either. None of us are." I stood in the wings of a sold-out arena, surrounded by the 5 most impossible, most maddening, most devastatingly sincere men I had ever met in either of my lives, and felt every last brick of Elliot Hargrove's careful wall crumble into dust. And then, because the universe apparently could not let me have a single uninterrupted moment of emotional devastation, my stomach chose that exact second to growl audibly enough that Mikey heard it from 3 feet away. The tenderness in the room evaporated instantly. "Was that a stomach?" Mikey said, delighted. "Or did the truss guy come back for round 2? "I have been performing live television for 11 consecutive minutes," I said with as much dignity as I could scrape together. "I am allowed to be hungry. Somebody find me a pretzel, or I will start biting people." "There she is," Rex murmured, amused, sliding an arm around my waist and steering me toward catering. "There's our villain." Of course, the universe rarely lets a person enjoy a nice moment for long. By week 6, the plot came looking for me exactly the way I'd feared it would. It just wore a different face than I'd expected. Trevor Voss, early 30s, a former teen pop star turned insufferable talk show fixture, brought on as a guest mentor for the show's Industry Icons episode, the kind of man who called everyone champ and meant none of it warmly. In the book, Trevor didn't exist. But the plot, I was starting to realize, was less a rigid script and more a hungry current, always looking for a new vessel to carry the same disaster downstream. And Trevor had clearly been recruited by fate, or by his own petty jealousy of my chart numbers, to play the part. He cornered me backstage after rehearsal, all teeth and no warmth. "You're getting a lot of attention for someone who can't actually sing without help," he said, low enough that only I could hear. "Word is production's been auto-tuning you since day 1. Be a shame if that got out right before the semifinal." He's lying, I thought immediately, cold dread pooling in my stomach even as my face stayed carefully neutral. He doesn't have proof, he can't have proof, there's nothing to leak because it's not true, but people believe rumors faster than facts, and if this hits the internet before I can. 5 sets of ears, 3 hallways away, heard every word of that thought at the exact same moment, and I have been told, repeatedly, gleefully, by all 5 of them since, that it took Rex Kane exactly 4 seconds to physically relocate himself to my location. "Something you'd like to say to my face, Voss." Rex's voice, when he arrived, had dropped into a register I hadn't heard from him before, quiet, precise, and genuinely frightening in a way his usual dramatic posturing never quite managed. Trevor's smugness flickered. "This doesn't concern you, Kane. Anything concerning him concerns me," Rex said, stepping between us with the easy, immovable authority of a man who owned the building we were standing in, which, as it turned out, given the Kane family's stake in half the venues on the West Coast, he technically did. "I'd think very carefully about what you post tonight." Liam, Daniel, Mikey, and Charlie arrived within the next 90 seconds, having apparently sprinted the length of the soundstage, and formed a loose, casual, deeply intimidating semicircle around Trevor that made his bravado visibly deflate like a punctured pool float. "Funny," Daniel said mildly, tapping something into his phone. "I actually have the raw, unedited studio session from Elliot's semi-final rehearsal, every note completely live, isolated vocal track and everything. I could release that literally any time if anyone happened to be spreading rumors that needed correcting." Trevor's face went the color of old oatmeal, and, Mikey added sweetly, holding up his own phone with an expression of pure, chaotic delight, "I've actually been filming this entire conversation for my behind-the-scenes content. You've got great lighting on you right now, by the way. Real villain-era cheekbones." Trevor lunged for the phone on pure panic instinct, missed spectacularly, tripped over a coil of stage cable he himself had been standing next to for the entire conversation, and went down hard, directly into a rolling rack of costume garment bags, which promptly toppled over and buried him under approximately 40 sequined blazers. The clip, Mikey's clip, complete with Trevor's muffled threats and subsequent humiliating collapse into a mountain of sequins, was online within the hour. It did not get taken down. It got 4 million views by midnight, and an official statement from the network the next morning quietly confirming that Trevor Voss would no longer be appearing on the show, due to unprofessional conduct. Somewhere behind me, a production assistant who had clearly been filming the entire exchange for the show's blooper reel let out a long, low whistle. "That," she said, "is going in the season highlight package whether legal likes it or not." I stood in the wreckage of sequined blazers, staring down at the man who'd tried to end me, and felt something loosen in my chest that had been clenched tight since the moment I woke up in this body. You didn't have to do that, I said quietly, to all 5 of them, once Trevor had been extracted, still sequin-flecked by an unimpressed stage manager. Yes, we did, Liam said simply, sliding an arm around my waist like it belonged there, because at this point it did. You're ours. We look after what's ours. Ours, I thought, and this time I didn't fight the warmth that spread through my chest at the word. I could get used to that. You already have, Rex murmured against my ear, low and warm. Weeks ago. Then, in the exact same breath, without missing a beat. Also, for the record, I'm keeping the sequined blazer footage, framing it, possibly for the label's office lobby. That is deeply unprofessional, I said. I'm aware, Rex said, entirely unrepentant, and I decided, on the spot, that I did not actually mind. The finale arrived the way finales do in stories like this, too fast and impossibly slow at once. Backstage, an hour before we were due to walk out for the last live broadcast of the season, I stood in the middle of a room that had somehow, over 4 months, become the closest thing to home I'd had in either of my lives. Liam paced by the door, unable to sit still. Daniel sat at the upright piano, nobody remembered wheeling in, playing something soft and half-finished. Mikey lounged upside down on the couch, legs over the back, scrolling something on his phone with performative casualness that didn't fool anyone. Charlie stood near the mirror, straightening a collar that didn't need straightening, and Rex leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching me with an intensity that had stopped making me nervous weeks ago, and started making me feel, instead, entirely and completely seen. You're doing the thing, Mikey said, breaking the quiet, pointing an accusatory finger at me from his upside-down position on the couch. The thing where you go very still and start thinking in complete, grammatically correct paragraphs. That's your monologue voice. We know your monologue voice. I don't have a monologue voice. You absolutely have a monologue voice, Daniel said, not looking up from the piano. It's happening right now. You're doing it. I would like it on record that I find all of you deeply invasive. Noted, Rex said, entirely unbothered, and ignored. I thought back to the studio floor, the first morning, waking up terrified and alone, certain I was doomed to be nothing but a stepping stone in someone else's story. I thought about every cold word I'd forced out of Elliot Hargrove's mouth, and every soft, true thing I'd thought underneath it, desperate and unheard, or so I'd believed. I didn't have to hide anymore. Not one thought. Not one word. I took a breath, straightened my shoulders, and let every mask I'd built over 4 months fall away at once. I choose you, I said, and my voice came out steady, clear, and completely unguarded for the first time I've woken up in this life. All 5 of you, I know that's not how this is supposed to work. I know there's supposed to be one winner, one love interest, one tidy ending. But I don't want tidy. My voice cracked, just slightly, and I let it. I want this, all of it, all of you, for as long as you'll have me. The room went silent for exactly 1 heartbeat. I was scared, I admitted, softer now, eyes stinging. I woke up in this body, convinced I was a footnote in somebody else's story, convinced I was going to end up alone, exposed and discarded, exactly like the book promised. I spent weeks trying to keep all of you at arm's length because I didn't think I deserved any of this. And then you kept showing up anyway, every single day, hearing every stupid, embarrassing, soft thing I thought, and never once using it against me. We'd never, Charlie said, voice thick. We love your thoughts, Liam said, crossing the room in 2 strides and pulling me into him, tipping my chin up with one gentle hand. Every ridiculous, sweet, over-the-top one of them. He kissed me then, soft and reverent, a kiss that tasted like every unspoken promise of the last 4 months finally being allowed to exist out loud. Daniel was there the moment Liam stepped back, turning my face toward him with quiet certainty, kissing me slow and deep, like something he'd been composing in his head for weeks and had finally found the right key for. We love every word you think, he murmured against my mouth. Mikey kissed me next, bright and a little wild, laughing into it even as his eyes went suspiciously shiny. We love you exactly like this. Loud thoughts and all. Charlie's kiss was tender, careful, like he was afraid I might vanish if he held on too tight, and then, when I pressed closer, deepened it like he'd finally been given permission to stop being careful. You deserve everything, he whispered. The whole world if you want it. And Rex kissed me last, and it was nothing like the others. It was possessive, certain, hungry in a way that left absolutely no room to doubt where I belonged. And we are never, he said against my lips, low and rough, letting you go. For one long, glowing moment, nobody in that room said anything at all. Then Mikey, still half upside down on the couch, where he'd apparently remained through the entire declaration of eternal love, cleared his throat loudly. "Not to interrupt whatever beautiful, soul-cleansing thing just happened," he said, "but we're on in 38 minutes, and Elliot's mascara is absolutely not waterproof. And also somebody needs to explain to me how 5 people just collectively confessed to one guy without a single one of you tripping over your words, because I rehearsed that in the mirror for a week and still choked." "You did not rehearse anything," Daniel said. "I absolutely rehearsed. Ask my reflection. It has notes." I laughed, a real one, wet and startled and completely undignified, my forehead still pressed to Rex's collarbone, and felt, for the first time since I'd woken up in this ridiculous, wonderful, borrowed life, entirely and permanently safe. 38 minutes, I said, wiping my eyes and shoving Mikey's feet off the couch cushion so I could sit down properly for exactly the nap I fully intended to take before hair and makeup got their hands on me again. "Wake me in 20. 5 men looked at each other, delighted, exasperated, and completely, hopelessly in love, and let me sleep. We walked out onto that stage 38 minutes later, not as rivals, not as a villain and his intended executioners, but as 6 people standing shoulder to shoulder. And when the votes came in, when the confetti dropped, when the announcer called our names as the season's winning act, nobody in that arena had any idea that the real victory had already happened, backstage, in a kiss and a nap that finally let a lonely, terrified, transmigrated choir teacher believe he was allowed to be loved out loud. 1 year later, I woke up in a sun-drenched bedroom in the Hollywood Hills to the sound of an argument about waffles. Not a metaphorical argument, an actual, ongoing, increasingly heated debate happening in our kitchen at 8 in the morning, involving 5 grown men, a waffle iron, and, from the sound of it, some kind of standoff over whether pineapple belonged in pancake batter, which, I would like the record to reflect, it absolutely does not. And I have never once budged on this position, despite 4 months of coordinated lobbying. "He's going to side with me," Mikey was saying, loud enough to carry down the hall. "He always sides with me on breakfast." "He does not," Daniel said, with the flat certainty of a man reading sheet music. "He sided with Charlie on the smoothie thing. That was different. The smoothie thing had spinach in it. That's a health crime, not a breakfast opinion." I padded into the kitchen in an oversized t-shirt that technically belonged to Rex, surveyed the scene. Flour on the counter, a slightly smoking waffle iron, Liam attempting to referee with a spatula, held like a gavel, and Rex standing off to the side with his arms crossed, radiating the specific smugness of a man who had already won and was simply waiting for everyone else to catch up, and made an executive decision. "No pineapple," I said. "Ever. In anything. This has been settled since March. Also, whoever let the waffle iron smoke like that owes me a nap later as compensation for the noise." Mikey threw both hands in the air. "This is bias. This is a hostile breakfast environment. You'll survive," I said, stealing his coffee and taking a long, satisfied sip while he gasped in outrage. It had been 8 months since the bonding ceremony, a small private thing up at the Kane family's coastal property, just the 6 of us, a handful of close friends, and Charlie's very emotional mother, who had cried so hard during the vows that Daniel had to pause the string quartet twice. No press, no cameras, for once in our lives. Just 5 bonding marks I now wore with a pride I never could have predicted, back when I was a terrified choir teacher, choking on gummy bears in a completely different life. Riff chose that exact moment to trot into the kitchen, plant himself in front of the pantry with the unwavering focus of a dog on a mission, and let out a single pointed bark directed at the fruit bowl, where, incidentally, a lone pineapple sat looking extremely smug for an inanimate object. "Absolutely not," I told the dog. "You're supposed to be on my side." "He's on the side of snacks," Charlie said. "It's not personal." We'd stayed on after the show ended. The network had begged, honestly, once Elliot and all 5 of them started trending and simply refused to stop, and now ran our own label out of a converted warehouse in Silver Lake, producing artists we actually believed in instead of whoever tested well with a focus group. Elliot Hargrove, former Cannon fodder, current co-founder and lead vocalist of the best-selling group in the country, according to Billboard, which was a sentence that still occasionally made me choke on my coffee for entirely unrelated reasons. Somewhere around the 8-month mark, we'd also acquired a dog, an enormous, gentle-eyed mutt named Riff that Mikey had just been fostering temporarily, for approximately 6 months longer than any reasonable definition of temporary allowed, and who now slept, without exception, directly across the foot of our bed, taking up roughly the same amount of space as an additional adult man. Riff had opinions about the pineapple debate too, mostly expressed by sitting directly in front of the pantry and refusing to move until someone gave up and fed him a strawberry instead. "You're thinking something," Rex said, appearing behind me at the counter, arms sliding around my waist, chin dropping to my shoulder. "I can feel it. I'm thinking about how ridiculous my life is," I admitted, leaning back into him. "In a good way, mostly." "Only mostly?" Liam asked, abandoning the waffle standoff to press a kiss to my temple. Charlie appearing on my other side a beat later to steal a sip of my coffee with zero shame, Daniel drifting over to rest a hand at the small of my back, and Mikey, still sulking about the pineapple verdict, flopping dramatically against the counter, beside us anyway, because apparently being mildly betrayed on breakfast matters didn't override the general household requirement of being within arm's reach of me at all times. "Mostly," I agreed, looking around at all of them, 5 men who had heard every ridiculous, insecure, secretly soft thought I'd ever had and chosen every single day since, to love me anyway, naps and all. "The pineapple thing is a real problem, though. I want that on the record." "Noted," Rex murmured against my ear, sounding entirely unbothered and completely delighted. "For the record, I heard that thought about how lucky you feel too. The one from 3 seconds ago, before the pineapple speech." I groaned and pressed my forehead into his shoulder, while the other 4 laughed, warm and easy, filling up the kitchen with a noise that still, after everything, felt like the best sound in the world. I'd thought I was a stepping stone once, a footnote, a cautionary tale in someone else's story. Turns out I was just early for my own, and also, apparently, extremely well rested, because between the 5 of them, somebody was always willing to cover a nap. If you made it all the way to the end of this chaos, thank you for sticking around, genuinely. If you enjoyed watching one very tired choir teacher get emotionally ambushed by 5 reality TV heartthrobs, do me a favor and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and drop a comment telling me which of the 5 you'd have folded for first, because I have opinions and I want to argue about them with you. See you in the next story.